It was the first warm stretch after a hard freeze in the late autumn of 1947, when the Harlan neighbors opened the door to their dug root cellar and breathed in what they thought was still clean air. The dirt floor held that familiar cool dampness. The shelves of potatoes and cabbages and the crocks of salted meat still looked the way they had the week before. The old man of the place had spread a thin white layer of lime mixed with wood ash across the floor, just as his father had told him years earlier. He believed that mixture would keep the moisture honest and the smell of rot from ever rising. The family ate from those stores for nearly 3 weeks while the warm spell lingered. By the time the youngest boy took sick with the stomach cramps that would not leave him, the damage had already sunk deep into every potato and every jar. It was not the weather that hurt them. It was not some animal that got inside. It was the myth that a light dusting of lime and ash could stand in for the real work of keeping a cellar honest. That myth has been whispered through these hills longer than most folks care to remember, and it still costs families their winter food and sometimes their health. My name is Rufus Red Harlan. I am 7th generation on this holler in the Ozarks. My grandfather raised me after the hard years and made me copy every rule of cold storage into a leather journal before he passed. He showed me with his own hands how lime and ash were never meant to be a casual sprinkle, and how the old men treated moisture and smell like living things that could turn against you if you gave them half a chance. I am going to walk you through every piece of the real method, the way those old men actually did it, including the one step that was quietly taken out of the books so that later generations would forget. This knowledge did not fade because it stopped working. It faded because people got tired of the work and started believing the shorter version. Subscribe not for Rufus. Subscribe because the buried cold storage skills are being brought back into daylight, and the next ones will matter. There are 6 pieces to the real way of handling lime and ash in a root cellar or dugout, and each one exists for a reason that the myths ignore. The first piece is the nature of the dirt itself. Most people today who still dig a cellar or reclaim an old one treat the floor like a blank surface that can be covered and forgotten. The old Ozark families never did that. They knew the dirt under their feet was already holding water from the last rain and from the seep that comes through the hills, no matter how carefully you sight the hole. They tested that dirt by packing a small ball of it in the palm and watching how long it held shape before crumbling. If it held more than a short while, they knew the moisture was already high, and any lime they put down would turn into a paste that sealed the dampness in rather than drawing it out. That is the opposite of what the myth claims. The myth says the white layer will dry things. In truth, a light layer on damp dirt creates a skin that traps the water below and forces the vapor up into the food. My grandfather made me dig test holes every spring and every fall, so I would feel the difference with my own hands. He said the dirt talks if you listen with more than your eyes. The second piece is the ratio of lime to ash and the way it must be mixed. The old men never used pure lime by itself, and they never used pure ash. Lime alone will cake hard when it meets moisture and then crack and let the damp rise unevenly. Ash alone will draw moisture for a short time and then become a wet gray mud that smells of old fire and starts to sour. The proper mix was 3 parts well-sifted hardwood ash to 1 part fresh builder's lime. They mixed it dry in a wooden trough until the white disappeared into the gray, and the whole mass felt light in the hand. Then they sifted it again through a fine screen so no lumps remained. That mix was never dumped. It was broadcast by hand in a thin, even cloud, while the air in the cellar was still moving from the open door. The thickness was no more than the thickness of a heavy sheet of paper. Any thicker and it would crust. Any thinner and it would do nothing. Most people who try the myth today pour a bag of lime across the floor or scatter fireplace ash from last winter without sifting. They create the very conditions that make the stores go off. The third piece is the timing with the weather. The old men watched the sky and the feel of the wind for days before they opened the cellar to treat the floor. They waited for a stretch of dry, cool air that followed a cold snap. The ground needed to be as dry as it was going to get, and the air needed to be moving so the moisture pulled from the dirt could leave the space instead of hanging in it. They never treated a cellar during a warm spell or right after a rain. The myth ignores all of that. It tells a man he can fix the damp any day he feels like it. That is how the neighbors lost their stores in 47. They spread the mix during the first warm days because the floor looked damp, and they wanted to get ahead of it. The lime and ash sealed the moisture in, and the warm air outside made the vapor rise faster. By the time they noticed the potatoes were sweating, the process was already deep into the flesh. The fourth piece is the preparation of the food itself, before the floor is treated. The old families never put a single potato or cabbage or crock into a cellar that had just received its lime and ash. They let the treated floor rest with the door open for at least 2 full days and 2 full nights, so any free moisture could leave and the surface could settle into a dry powder again. Only then did they bring the stores in, and only after every potato had been brushed clean of field dirt and every cabbage had its outer leaves removed. The myth treats the floor treatment as a cure that can be done around the food. In truth, the food and the floor must be handled as separate living systems. If the food is already carrying field moisture, the vapor from the sealed dirt will meet that moisture and start the rot from the inside. I have seen whole shelves of roots turn soft in less than a week when that meeting happens. The fifth piece is the ongoing watch of the smell and the feel of the air. After the stores were in place, the old men walked into the cellar every morning and every evening for the first 10 days. They did not look first. They breathed first. A proper cellar treated with the right mix will hold a clean mineral smell with a faint hint of wood ash and nothing more. If the smell turns sweet or sharp, or carries any hint of sour earth, the floor is failing and the food is already beginning to change. They also ran a clean hand across the surface of a potato, or the side of a crock. If the skin felt colder than the air, or if any bead of moisture appeared, they knew the vapor was rising and the stores needed to be moved, or the floor needed to be opened and dried again. The myth tells people that once the white layer is down, the work is finished. That is the most dangerous part of the lie. The work never finishes. The cellar is a living place, and the lime and ash are only a temporary helper that must be watched. The sixth piece is the honest limit of the method itself. Lime and ash cannot save a cellar that sits in a wet seep or a cellar whose walls weep after every rain. They cannot fix a roof that drips or a door that does not seal against the warm outside air. The old men knew that, and they said it plain. If the site was wrong, no amount of white powder would make it right. They chose high ground with good drainage, and they dug the floor deeper than most people think is needed, so the cool earth itself did more of the work than any surface treatment. The myth pretends that the powder is magic and that any hole in the ground can be made safe with it. That is why so many families still lose their stores. They dig where it is convenient, and then they sprinkle and hope. Hope is not a method. The emotional cost of believing the myth shows itself in the faces of the people who open the cellar in midwinter and find the potatoes black inside, and the cabbages soft, and the meat beginning to sour. I have watched grown men stand in the doorway and not speak for a long time because they know the work of the summer is gone and the winter ahead is going to be thin. Children get sick from food that looks sound but has already begun to change under the sealed dampness. The old knowledge kept those losses from happening because it treated the cellar as a partnership between the dirt, the air, the mix, and the daily watch. When that partnership is broken, the food turns against the family that trusted it. The complete system of how to choose the dirt, how to mix the 3-to-1 ratio, how to time the weather, how to rest the floor, how to watch the smell, and how to know the limits is collected in the Ozarks Cold Storage Codex. Over 100 pages, $19. The $19 price is only for the first 300 copies. After 300 copies, the price rises permanently and never returns. The link is in the description below this video. Now we come to the final critical step that separates the families who ate through winter from the ones who did not. After the floor has been treated and rested and the stores are in place, the old men did one more thing that never made it into the later books. They laid a second thin layer of pure sifted hardwood ash only under the shelves that held the root crops, and they left the open floor between the shelves bare. That second layer was applied with the same care as the first, but it was never mixed with lime. Pure ash under the potatoes and the turnips and the carrots draws any last bit of vapor that rises from the dirt and keeps it from reaching the skins. The open floor between allows the air to move and the main lime and ash mix to continue its work without crusting under the weight of the shelves. That separation is the step that was quietly left out. Later generations mixed everything together or covered the whole floor the same way and lost the advantage. The pure ash layer must be renewed every 6 weeks during the storage season by sweeping the old ash out and laying a fresh thin cloud. The timing is tied to the moon only in the sense that the old men preferred to work on the drying days after the full moon, when the sap in the wood and the moisture in the ground were both lower. They did not wait on superstition. They waited on the feel of the air and the dryness of the dirt. If a warm spell came, they opened the door at the coolest hour of the night and let the cellar breathe while they checked every potato by hand. Anyone that felt soft or smelled even faintly sweet was taken out and used at once or fed to the hogs. They never left a doubtful root next to a sound one. That daily discipline is what made the difference. The myth of the casual lime and ash layer skips every one of those disciplines and leaves a family believing the white powder has done the work for them. So here is what I want you to do. First, dig a small test hole in the floor of any cellar or dugout you plan to use, and pack the dirt in your hand to learn how much moisture it already holds. Second, mix 3 parts sifted hardwood ash to 1 part builder's lime, and sift it until it is light and even. Third, wait for a dry, cool stretch of weather after a cold snap, and treat the floor with a paper-thin layer while the door is open. Fourth, let the floor rest 2 full days and nights before any food goes in. Fifth, lay the pure ash only under the root shelves and leave the walkways open. Sixth, walk into that cellar twice a day for the first 10 days and every day after that, and trust your nose and the feel of the skins more than your eyes. The total material cost of the lime and the ash for a small family cellar is less than the price of 2 good meals if you gather the ash from your own hardwood fires and buy only the lime. Write in the comments and tell me whether your own cellar floor has ever held that sweet or sharp smell after a warm spell. I read every single one of these. The complete system of how to choose the dirt, how to mix the 3-to-1 ratio, how to time the weather, how to rest the floor, how to watch the smell, and how to know the limits is collected in the Ozarks Cold Storage Codex. Over 100 pages, $19. The $19 price is only for the first 300 copies. After 300 copies, the price rises permanently and never returns. The link is in the description below this video. Keep the pure ash layer under the roots and never trust a warm spell to leave your stores alone. The families who ate through the hard winters knew these things by heart, and that knowledge is still waiting for anyone willing to take it back.